Pluto square moon synastry. The Pluto person truly must tread carefully with the moon person in the synastry. This is a tricky or even a contradictory mixture of energies to interpret for many reasons. The Pluto person is the heavy hitter in this bitch. I know this, you know this, and whoever the moon person is will soon know and feel this. So the square, the challenge and difficulty the Pluto person brings to the moon heavily depends on the sign that the moon is in. There are some strong moon signs, and then there are weaker ones who cannot handle the Pluto person. This energy reminds me of a man and or woman claiming that you can't handle all of this, right? You get the woman into bed and find out that she can't take back shots with her back arched to perfection. Or this is a man who you can't handle all of this, but he can't last 5 minutes up in that beat. A lot of people claim they can handle intensity, possession, obsession, and even violence until they have to handle it. Now, do not get me wrong, the Pluto person isn't evil, but can be. My point starting off with the synastry is that some thrive in squares, meanwhile others crumble and fumble. So it's difficult to interpret this without getting too specific on the sign the Pluto person has in the moon. I suppose that's the purpose of the synastry, to test if you're about this life. The Pluto person will be challenged in dealing with the sensitivities of the moon person, especially if it's a weaker moon. The moon person will be challenged greatly on whether or not they can even handle the Pluto person in all their glory. The synastry reminds me of Bella and Edward in Twilight, with Edward being the Pluto person and Bella being the moon person for my example. We all thought Bella wasn't about that life, but she proved us and Edward all wrong. For my example, Bella appeared weak and deceptive in that manner, which the moon is known to be. However, she really had the all-powerful Edward on his knees plenty of times. Edward, being the Pluto person, did struggle greatly with his love, obsession, and desire for Bella, all while trying not to kill her. I used to be into dark romance books, and all the ladies obsessed over the killers, the thugs, the psychos, and the unhinged, but very sexy men in these books, but they all knew that if that book fantasy man came to reality, they would fold, be scared, call cops, and run away. We fantasize about the Pluto person, but in reality, can we handle them? The moon person in the synastry will find out firsthand, and it will be life-changing in a destructive or empowering way. However, you have to experience it first. You can't keep the Pluto person at a distance. You will be forced to experience them, all of them, and this may scare the moon person off or, like I aforementioned, empower him or her. Similar to Bella, she was scared of Edward, but that made her want him all the more until it was too late to turn back at the end of her journey or movie or book series. She realized that she was born to be a vampire. She would have never gotten that empowering realization had she avoided Edward. My point is, the Pluto person is feared by the moon person. However, the moon person can intuit and sense that there's more to the Pluto person that they have to discover. Spiritually speaking, the moon person knows that they need the Pluto person, but there's fear, denial, and maybe a lack of familiarity in the physical sense. But emotionally, the Pluto person feels like home to the moon person, and honestly, the Pluto person feels like the moon person is home to them as well. However, the Pluto person will constantly have to be concerned about hurting, breaking, or ruining the moon person, or trying their damnedest to avoid the moon person. Okay? Here comes the contradiction, or maybe I'm sensing the energetic shift, but the Pluto person may be the avoidant initially, and the moon person may be the covert chaser. Like Edward, he was avoiding Bella, and Bella was secretly asking about Edward and very curious about him and going to bookstores to research his mythical stories in hopes of gaining more knowledge. Her intuition was telling her she was missing something, but what was that something? Bella was clingy, but Edward was possessive. To my next point, the moon person will be very clingy, but the Pluto person will be possessive, protective, and secretly dangerous. And that's only something that the moon person will be privy to. It's possible for others not even being aware that this couple even exists, okay? Now, in the event people know you're a couple, that's all they'll know. And this may attract stalkers or people heavily invested in your relationship. You both have secretive energy separately and more so collectively. Let's say this couple work together. They can literally go outside on lunch break, have a back-breaking sex session, and then come back into work looking calm, cool, and collected, and depending, may even appear as if they don't even know each other, okay? In a negative sense, this industry can be abusive, but it's covered up very well until it's not. As I'm typing this, I feel like my energy is shifting in so many different directions, and that's the vibe with this couple. It's not necessarily a stable connection, and that will be the square for the moon person, because their emotional instability will be heightened and reflected back. It's important to note that because this relationship isn't stable, doesn't mean that it's toxic, though it can be. This synastry will feel odd to others, almost like Aquarius energy, but unable to pinpoint what the oddity is, like Piscean energy, but I digress. Jacob thought Bella was going to die when she finally had sex with Edward. In Jacob's mind, someone on the outside, he concluded Bella and Edward's relationship was toxic and life-threatening. However, on the inside of this relationship, Edward and Bella thought they had things under control and wanted whatever came with each other. So people on the outside will be so disturbed and bothered by this couple because they cannot get in, and this can be good and or a bad thing. Bad in the sense that what if the moon person was being abused and no one can get in to help him or her? But good in the sense that the Pluto person is so protective of the moon person that the Pluto person would rather die than to allow any harm to come to the moon person. This couple is hard to define because you never really know what's going on, and this can be dangerous to the couple and to others on the outside of this couple. It's very hard to tell. If you have annoying neighbors who like abusive sex and you hear them screaming, how do you know if someone's being abused or if they just like really aggressive and wall-breaking sex? Do you get involved and risk being wrong and exposed as nosy, or do you leave them alone and risk someone actually being in danger? I'm using sex as a relatable example because this applies to all kinds of situations. We will never really know with this couple because the moon person will appear weak and vulnerable in comparison to the Pluto person. However, what if secretly the moon person has the secret strength to put the Pluto person on their knees? Like in the dark romance books, the men in the book are portrayed as Pluto types, and they were very scary, dangerous, and physically stronger. However, their ladies in those books, who in my example is the moon person, had those dark and very scary men on their knees for them. Whatever the moon person needed or wanted, the Pluto person obliged and then some. It doesn't matter if the Pluto person is the woman and the moon person is the man, the dynamic is all the same. People on the outside will always assume that the Pluto person is too dangerous, serious, and hardcore, or they may suspect something dark about the Pluto person that they don't like but can't prove. Meanwhile, the moon person will appear weak, unsuspecting, and innocent, but sometimes it's the moon person who has all the power. Whatever the case, it will be extremely hard for this couple to break up, and that's another square. If things are all bad and warrant this couple to separate, they won't be able to because there's a deep soul tie here. In the event the couple needs to separate for, work or life circumstances, it will literally feel like death for them. Remember, Edward had Bella jumping off cliffs, and Bella had Edward ready to get burned at the stake. Both could not be without each other and were more than willing to go to extremes to bring the other back. I don't know if it's either extremely romantic to some and for others traumatizing, because in a negative sense, the Pluto person would be the type to kill the moon person and their babies and then him or her before letting them leave the relationship. The moon person will literally go emotionally and eventually mentally crazy without the Pluto person, because the moon is the mind in Vedic astrology. Do you see the overall dilemma, the square? This synastry is so powerful that it'll appear like an opposition. Oppositions insert themselves into dynamics because of the powerful soul tie that these two with Pluto square moon have. It's so dynamic that it's threatening to others, making others feel inclined to oppose it. It's hard to explain, but this couple is hard to understand for each other and especially for others. This couple must fight to stay together and fight to stay apart. They must fight others who oppose them because others cannot understand or respect their dynamic, even if it's not toxic. I can go on and on, but I will conclude here. If you have Pluto, square moon, and synastry, be prepared for people on the outside wishing to get in to oppose your relationship. These people can sense a very strong undercurrent of energies between the two of you, but because they don't understand it, they will fear it and cause drama that will force the Pluto person to defend and protect or to be exposed. The Pluto person's challenge is love, protect, and handle the moon person with care, but be willing to die and or sacrifice for the moon person no matter what, if you truly love the moon person. However, if you do not love the moon person as the Pluto person, and you're secretly a monster, your challenge will be getting exposed and left to deal with the light. All things done in the dark are brought to the light, so pick a struggle. As for the moon person, your challenge is facing your fears and handling that Pluto deep or beep. But no, seriously. Like Bella, she was constantly around other vampires who wanted to kill her. She was constantly in situations that she had no power. Bella was somewhat helpless until she fought for equal vampire rights. Speaking to the moon person, your challenge is to become empowered and stronger through all the trials and tribulations you are surely to endure being with the Pluto person. Your comfort levels will constantly be eroded, challenged, and tested, and you will need to overcome them and to come out wanting more. When I think of the moon, I think of pregnancy. Did you know women can die during childbirth? No one talks about this openly or even appears concerned about this when they try to get pregnant. Why? Because the love they usually have for the man overpowers the possibility of facing death. There's a deep-rooted level of trust these people have for each other that carries them through the darkest pits of hell, or a deep-rooted distrust. Now, I'm just using this as an example, but hopefully you get the point. The love you have for your Pluto person as the moon person will make you more than willing, resilient, and empowered to face death if that's required for your Pluto person. Now, death comes in many different forms, but the point is your love for the Pluto person is the ultimate challenge. How deep is your love vibes? Your love will be exposed in the light as well. So what you both initially hid about your feelings, love, and relationship towards each other and others will be exposed eventually. I hope what's exposed is unconditional love, a bigger ass from taking those back shots, and overcoming opposition that is waiting for you both at the door. Do you both love each other enough to run into a burning building to save each other? Or do you hate each other enough to start the fire with them in it? Are you both willing to dive in the deep oceans to save each other? Or are you going to throw them in the deep ocean in hopes that they die and are eaten by sharks? Are you willing to save room on a floating door in hopes you both survive? Or will you allow your Pluto or moon person to freeze to death like Homegirl did in the Titanic?